between the ages 4 and 5, rituals increased in frequency. I was taken to more places. I don't exactly remember all the places that I went to, but I remember getting in trouble a lot because I would talk about things to other kids that I would play with in like the neighborhood. And it would bring, I guess, more attention, negative attention. I remember my folks saying things around me, talking about me, while I'm in the room, saying, well, maybe he's psychic. Dad'd be like, he's not psychic. And I remember for my birthday and around Christmas time, I'm a Christmas Eve baby, and my uncle and my aunt got me a Bible that year, and like a little, children's illustration Bible. I think it was called like My Beginner Bible or something like that. They had got it for me, and this is kind of an example of like how I would say too much. And I remember one time in church, I'm sitting in the pews with my parents while the preacher's preaching his sermon. And when you're a little kid, the preacher's preaching and you get bored. And I would like to draw. That would be kind of my way of, distracting myself. And I would draw in the Bible. I drew in that Bible that my uncle and my aunt gave me, in the like blank pages before the text in the front and the very back. And I remember one time I got in a lot of trouble for that because I was drawing some pretty disturbing images. Things that I think some other people in the church may have saw and had some questions about, and it I guess brought up some bad attention. I remember getting in a lot of trouble, and I had to erase it, and I got yelled at pretty hard. I remember them saying things like, you can't draw things like that because we could get in trouble. I think I had more signs of trauma than they wanted to see. When you go through these rituals, what's supposed to happen is the kid going through it's not supposed to remember at all. But I would remember parts more than I was supposed to. And I remember one time we went to a more grand, elaborate ritual out in Portland, and I don't exactly remember the whole ritual like I do some of the other ones, but I do remember going there with my grandpa, my dad, my grandma at night, and then coming back. And I remember coming back home after that night, and Grandpa and Dad are going to talk in the living room. I think he called it talks on the path or something like that, the way he had phrased it. And so they sit down and they start talking. And I remember Dad being like, well, he probably shouldn't be here. And Grandpa saying, oh, well, no, it's fine. He can hear some truth. And so they sit me down and they start talking. And they start talking about some of the programs and things that they have access to because they're members of this association, of this organization, the lodge, these lodges. And, my dad starts telling them about, some of the things that I did in the rituals, how, like, I told some kids not to drink the juice and, refusing, to do certain things and remembering too much. And grandfather proceeds to tell my dad about a program that they have access to called the War of the Mind. And the way he described it, he had said it as almost as if my dad went through something like that before too. And I remember my dad saying something along the lines of, "Yeah, I remember. I didn't like it." But Grandpa tells him that there's money and benefits, and that the government would learn from putting someone like, I guess, myself through the program. I mean, I'm not the only one. There's others, but he's convincing my dad to put me through some kind of program. Dad's kind of reluctant. So we'll fast forward. My uncle would visit my dad more often after those talks that they had, my dad and my grandpa. And I remember one time he came by and they had brought it up again. I remember hearing the word, he might be psychic. It runs in the family. I guess apparently it's like every third generation, the gift passes down, and it's usually dominantly like a female gift. You see a lot of women that have the talent, but boys can have it too. Anyway, my uncle's telling my dad about the program. Oh, well, yeah, all those guys in Seattle, those rock guys, they were monarchs. And I don't know, I guess he must have, I don't know if he convinced them all the way, but eventually a man comes by the house. And I either had just turned 5 or was about to. I'm getting close to going to school. Public school. Anyway, this man comes by. And he comes into my bedroom. And he's got like a suitcase, like a box, big box looking suitcase. And he sits me down in a chair by the window. I had a window that overlooked the backyard. And he sits me down in this chair and he opens up the box. And there's these wires. And he puts these things like on my head in different spots. And he started asking me some questions. Asked me things about like what to close my eyes and to tell him what I saw. And then I don't remember anything after that. I black out. Nothing. Wake up the next day and One thing I do remember that was different is that my ears were hurting. They were ringing. And they still ring. And they never stopped. But it started that day. Have a good day, guys.